in an institution to break the routine. We celebrate all the holidays. I mean, birthdays, Christmas, any holiday. The anticipation, building up to it. I mean, you know, just like children. I mean, the closer we get and the excitement gets up, then when they see us putting the stockings and the presents out, we're not going to be in there with them, but we put it out in their rooms for them, then it really builds. And it just, and they go in just screaming in delight. Rather than just eating the food, they give each other's hugs. They're so delighted. They've got all these great things to eat, and they're so happy. They're just so delighted that the social love and affection and what a good time we're having are really more important than eating all these goodies. In terms of analyzing what they talk about, we found that the smallest part, one of the smallest things, 5% had to do with food. The vast majority of it had to do with the social nature, and that would fit into categories like reassurance. You know, you get in a fight, you're reassured. Play, a very, very big category, which again is social interaction. Grooming, again, social interaction. So the vast majority, you know, over 90% of what they would talk about in terms of those different categories, you could put in the larger category of social relationships. And most of our stuff, in family, in home, when we're dealing with social relationships, really has to do with that. I mean, we're talking about grooming, we're talking about discipline, we're talking about reassurance, we're talking about the immediate needs of the family.
Although no two individuals in Washoe's family are related, they are in the truest sense family. Their feelings can, to a degree, be measured. Science can analyze the chemicals that flow at a mother's gentle touch, or count the number of emotional exchanges in a given day. What is beyond quantification is the supreme value of family, nature's great gift to social animals. Family is so important to survival that nature cannot resist rewarding this vital bond. It's evident in the joy of reunion, in the irresistible smile of a helpless infant, in the chemicals that sweeten a mother's love for her child. When the bonds of family are threatened, the darker side of nature's chemistry is experienced in feelings of terror, in the pain of separation, in the anguish of loss. Emotions were nature's first sentinels of well-being and peril. They remain an animal's first line of defense. The ability to communicate emotion allows animals to look out for each other within the covenants of family and fellowship. Nature's imperative is clear. Emotions are the key to survival. Ancient voices. Animals may have no words, but they have languages. Calls, howls, even songs. And they have meaning. Emotional meaning. At one extreme, there is fear, warning animals of danger. What is the other end of the emotional spectrum? What feelings compel an animal to stay close to the safety and comfort of family?
You have to have emotions to make a decision. The attachment emotion becomes critical. We don't lay our eggs in the sand and swim off. I mean, we've got to have this bonding. So what we're talking about here with emotion is very critical behaviors required for our survival. Without them, we die.
For many years, there has been a scientific assumption that only humans have the capacity for the higher emotions. Loyalty, grief, empathy. But are we unique in our complexity? Or are emotions a universal language? Few people can read the emotional signals of elephants better than husband and wife filmmakers Beverly and Derek Joubert, who have spent nearly 2 decades capturing African wildlife on film. One indelible scene the Jouberts recorded was of an elephant family's remarkable devotion during a moment of physical and emotional crisis.
It was a hard time for the elephants because we were going through a period of drought and they were traveling, they were migrating. The water was drying, it was getting pretty muddy. So often the females would, let their trunks dangle in and they'd be able to drink. And this one little elephant was trying to drink with his tiny little trunk dangling in, and of course he got pushed in accidentally. Once he fell into the water, the mud became almost like quicksand and pulled his little body in. The mother, first of all, trumpeted and sort of whirled around, trying to maybe get attention and in panic. And then she eventually knelt down and she climbed into the mud herself and she put her trunk and her tusks underneath this little elephant and tried to maneuver him.
Somehow they were communicating amongst each other, so that while the mother who was the matriarch and the second matriarch were struggling to get the little guy released from the mud, there was somebody else breaking away the bank, creating a ramp for him so that when he did come out, he could just run up this bank. There were buffalo around, others were warding off the buffalo, and so there was this whole community effort going on there.
Eventually, through her calling, a lot of the others in her herd came and assisted her, and they actually eventually popped the little guy out. It was just an amazing time to see the compassion they had and what gentleness they were doing to even get this little guy out, and how when he was out, how they each one would then go to him afterwards and just test and smell if he was all right. And of course he was so covered in mud, all that he could think of doing was rolling and getting it all off him.
Katie Payne spends her life listening to the voices of animals. An acoustic biologist, Katie was among the first scientists to hear the songs of whales.
55, 12, 13, 14.
Now she has tuned her ear to the mysterious sounds of elephants, trying to decipher the emotional content of their rumbling conversations.
I think that elephants' communications are full of emotion. Social emotions are probably the glue that holds together the society. They're the individual experiences that cause animals to look out for each other. And without that passion, if you will, or desire to be a social group, the calves wouldn't have the communal care, which is essential to bring them to maturity. Everything that they do seems to come out of a we communal perspective and not very much out of an I individual perspective.
Katie normally does her research in Africa, but on this occasion she visited a captive herd in New Jersey.
We did a little experiment. We broadcast sounds from African elephants and watched the behavior of this group of females and this single male. We got an absolutely fascinating reaction. The question that I had was, why are they so terribly excited? The only answer I can come up with is that they were hearing the voice of an individual they hadn't heard before, and they were feeling turfish. Who is this so close to us, and how did she come to be here?
These elephants had heard no other elephant voices but each other's in over 20 years.
You see how they freeze? Everybody listening together? You often see these freezes when actually there is nothing that the microphone will pick up. I believe that they often freeze in order to listen for others when they haven't heard others. I think it's one of the most interesting signs that they're living outside of their own personal experience, thinking about or imagining others at a distance. It's fantastic when you see 100 elephants doing this. Elephants don't get over emotions quickly. They'll be remembering this.
During moments of high stress or great emotion, elephants secrete a substance called temperin from glands near their eyes. While scientists don't call these expressions tears, most agree that they are an emotional response.
Scientists are amazingly backward about their willingness to ascribe emotions to non-human animals. And in part, I think this is because emotions are hard to prove, but it's immensely important that we get over this block, because when we do figure out how to notice, acknowledge, and measure emotions, then we're going to learn things about animals that people had never believed were possible.
I think we can prove that animals have emotion. I think that there are lots of people now who are starting to learn the techniques that will enable us to answer those questions.
The study of facial expressions is one way of measuring emotion. Chimpanzees have among the most expressive faces in the natural world.
I think you can believe what you see in a chimpanzee facial expression. When they're screaming, I don't think there's any reason not to believe that they're upset about something the same way that we would be upset about something.
Studies have already identified at least 5 universal expressions, easily recognizable in higher primates. Fear, disgust, happiness, surprise, and anger.
Right now we're doing a lot of tests that involve face recognition to get enough background about emotion and what the chimpanzees understand about their emotional signals and what they understand about what the context might be if there's been a fight, if they're involved in calming one another down after a fight. When they play, they have very distinctive facial expressions, and this kind of behavioral evidence gives us the first basis to believe that these facial expressions have very distinctive meanings and that they do communicate about different types of emotion. what the chimpanzee understands about their own emotional signals and their own emotional behavior is really, I think, pertinent to understanding a little bit more about the evolution of emotion in humans and why we are the way we are.
The difference between you and a chimpanzee or you